But starting with you, Cabinet Secretary Waiguru, because you're in charge of devolution, you're also in charge of planning. We've had very good things being said on stage, both by your colleagues in cabinet and also by people in the private sector. Problem is that all this costs money. Now, you're the one who has to decide in terms of planning how to distribute resources. Is there enough resources in this country to accomplish everything that everyone wants?
I think, like any institution or any country, there is no country that has resources for everything. And that is why we prioritize planning. Planning is important because then it gives government direction, not just in terms of selecting the things that are of great priority that take the country towards its achieved objective, but also to ensure that you have then, in the process of allocating resources, that you're able to allocate resources to the things that actually matter where your agenda is concerned. So like every other institution, there is no, or country, there is no country that can say that they have more money for everything. And that's why planning is important.
Thank you. Now, yours, Cabinet Secretary Matiang'i, is something interesting because it comes out of two different slides. In fact, it was more or less the same slide that said what might sound contradictory. One is the notion of open government. We want to have as much information about the citizen, about how government operates, about services, being open and present to the citizen. But you've also been key in emphasizing the role of cybersecurity. Now, could we reach a situation where we have the information, but someone else has access to it? Someone knows my medical record, someone knows my education record, and that's someone who should not know my education record, and things like those. How do you balance the need for openness against the fact that there are people who will do damage with that openness?
Yeah, thank you. Well, that is really the challenge, to balance between the needs, the imperatives of open government, and the issue of cybersecurity and even responsible citizenship. What we use, for instance, I mean, we may just, let's take an example of a failing, data that should be in the public domain, whether it's on our population, our investment in the health sector, and so on and so forth. What we use the data for and how we manage that data is a serious concern. And that's why we have been emphasizing government is very concerned about cybersecurity, not just because of the information or personal information that may be available that could be in the wrong hands, but just because of your own individual information. I mean, let me give you the example of banking. If we do not manage cybersecurity effectively, and we have all manner of thugs hacking into our banking systems, can you imagine the chaos that can throw our financial sector to? So, yes, we want to run open government. Yes, we are determined to do whatever it takes to ensure that we are transparent and we are going to have an open government regime. But we also have a responsibility, first as society. I mean, government will do whatever it takes to provide security and to do some sort of cyber policing, but it's all of us. I mean, there are so many private investors in this room. There are so many private investors out there. They want their information to be secure. They want their plans and whatever they do to be secure. And there's so many things. We've received so many comments recently about people's websites that have been hacked. I met a member of parliament who told me someone has been running a Facebook page in his name for the last 5 years, and so on and so forth. I mean, all these have got to do with cybersecurity. National leaders are not safe. I mean, we are aware of cases where imposters have been running, Facebook accounts in the name of national leaders and so on. This calls for, one, of course, security, yes, but most importantly, responsibility on the part of the individual Kenyans. But we also have a responsibility. We here is used advisedly to mean collectively. Government and industry, we have a responsibility to create a safe cyber regime. And that's why cyber policing is going to be a critical issue going forward. We may do all these things we are doing, but if we are not able to secure the information that we have, if we are not able to secure even information that private investors want secured, we are not safe as a country and we are not a safe society for investors. Thanks.
All right. When you spoke about the dangers to banking, I saw Cabinet Secretary Aden Mohammed shudder until he remembered he's no longer a banking manager, is now in cabinet. But Catherine Gahu, you have been in the ICT board, and so I dare say you've actually been overseeing this sector for longer than Dr. Matiang'i. What have you whispered to him? What lessons have you learned? Where are the pitfalls? What sort of things does he need to watch out for as it now becomes a cabinet department on its own? I suspect your microphone might not be on. Yeah, there you are.
Okay, yes, I was saying that the first thing I would like to say is to acknowledge the statement by the Cabinet Secretary regarding the consolidation of the ICT functions within government. And the reason I find this very important is that it addresses problems that we've had for the 6 years that we have been involved in creating the work that we have done in this board. And I believe the other bodies feel the same, that there has been serious lack of harmony, challenges with, that have hindered or delayed implementation of projects, a level of opaqueness, because here you are holding certain information, then there is the other department holding another piece of the information required to make the project happen, yet another department holds another piece of the information. So one of the greatest lessons we've learned is that you need to harmonize and address those issues. So when the Cabinet Secretary talks about reorganization of the governance of the ICT sector in government, it's most welcome. And I think it expresses an understanding of the problems we've had. And I believe it means that he's really done his research and has understood all the challenges that have been hindering, well, many of the projects that we have been trying to implement. Thank you.
Aden Mohammed, I'm finding a difficult time imagining you as a cabinet secretary, but you're now secretary in charge of industrialization. And I suspect it's also a bit of a 180-degree turn for you, because when you come from the private sector, things such as efficiency and such buzzwords is to do the most you can with the least amount of resources. When you come into government, it's slightly different in the sense that you're thinking, how many more jobs can we create? In effect, you have to become slightly less efficient when it comes to government. Is that the case? Do you feel a bit of difficulty trying to adjust from one hat to the other?
Well, thank you very much. I think, first of all, I don't think the issue of creating more jobs and having efficiency are by themselves contradictory. Because the government is also, just like any enterprise, want to do the most with the smallest amount of resources that you have. But what is really important is, going forward, what the public sector will try and do is to provide a very powerful enabling environment to the private sector to thrive in this country. And private sector is there to do all those things that they have done very well over time. It will create more jobs, something that is very much aligned with government's own intentions. They are there to create more wealth for people in the country. And so the desire to make sure that the private sector increases their productivity, wealth creation, job creation, is something that the government is actually very keen to make sure that we support that program. Now, and that is where the dialogue, as Dr. Fred mentioned, between what is it that the private sector wants to actually do exactly those things that I've just mentioned, and see how we can actually bridge that gap to make sure that they succeed, create the wealth, create the jobs, improve the economy. And that enabling environment is something that is not the preserve of government to know all of it, neither is it something that the private sector would want, everything that can be created in day one. So it's that dialogue that I think is really important, And this is just one example of those dialogue between the private sector and government, and we should be able to replicate more of this to thrive and achieve those objectives I've just talked about.
Secretary Balala, yours, I suspect, would be very similar in terms of a question to what you've just asked Secretary Mohammed, which is, in mining, especially where we're going with petroleum and those sorts of industries, it's now much easier to deal with a lot fewer people. One geologist with a good piece of software, with a good piece of kit, will be able to do what perhaps 20 years ago 10 people needed to do. Again, how do you balance what people are expecting out of this new industry, petroleum, coal, and all the rest, in terms of providing jobs, to what is actually the reality that companies will come and say, we want to employ 10 people, and not the 1,000 people that you expected?
I think the most important thing is the transparency in it. One is the transparency in geology, to know what is in the ground, what is available to be mined. And then the second thing is the licensing aspect of it, the transparency in dishing out the concessions. How are we dishing it out? Is it to friends and to a few people, or do we dish it out through a transparent and maybe a tendering system? And that is what we are talking about. So, as Anne said, there's a lot of opaqueness. So in this industry, opaqueness is the order of the day, currently now. How do we now come out from this opaqueness and come to a transparent system, particularly in licensing? And then, how do we go to know where the minerals are? So the technology used in geology to know the soils, to know what is inside that soil, is very important. And the final aspect is, there's export going on. You are told they are exporting 100,000 tons a year of soil for certain aspect of minerals. But in that soil, there's only 1% of that mineral. How do we know if we don't have a proper laboratory system and an audit where we be able to do the random check of exports? And that has been done very efficiently in the tea industry. Why can't we do it in the mining industry? Particularly when you export sand and you don't know what type of sand. Because till now, we have not exported value added. We are still exporting raw sand for processing overseas. So that is another aspect we want to take in consideration, particularly in terms of establishing a laboratory system where we have tests done and auditing of these exports that are going out.
Now, Dr. Matiang'i, there's been a promise made by the president with regard to harmonization of ICT sectors, the different players in the ICT sector. But more than that, is each government department, parastatals and everyone, is sourcing for ICT from different places for different reasons, and they all claim to be experts in what they're sourcing. You'll have a difficult task in trying to coordinate that, trying to fulfill the president's pledge to coordinate and make sure we're as efficient as we can be. How do you intend to do that?
Well, I wish I had a direct answer to that. The question is, it's true, you know, we are moving forward to reform the ICT sector from the point of view of various players who have been doing this. And quite frankly, I mean, many of them have done such a commendable work. I mean, particularly the three departments that are always mentioned. They have done such a fantastic work in government. It's not as if they have not been doing anything. They have been doing a lot of work. We are where we are today, courtesy of the work that has been done by colleagues at the Directorate of E-Government, colleagues at the ICT board, at CHIEF, and of course, what my colleague Anne has been, fervently leading, in the Treasury. The question is, are we ready for reform? Because that's the question I think you're asking. Are we ready for reform? One of the things you need to conduct such a radical reform or to effect such radical reform in government, one of the most precious commodities that you need is political will. Because in most cases, there are so many great things that people would like to do in society, but there's lack of political will to do them. the most interesting thing about Kenya today is that this reform is not being led from within the ranks of government. It is being led from the top of government. It is the president himself who's saying, this is the way we are going. What more political will you need to do this? Because it's the president who has issued the executive order, who says, I want order, I want harmonization, I want coordination. So I think we have what I may describe as the most important ingredient to move forward, namely the political will that is manifest clearly in the leadership of the country, that is so determined that that is the way we are going to go, and that's how government is going to be organized. Now, with that, it is not going to be hard to achieve what we have outlined we want to achieve. It may take time. I mean, I find this very interesting, and I must say this because many key players in the ICT sector are here. There's a certain impatience, on the part of the people, the sector itself. People want questions answered tomorrow. They want files to stop disappearing tomorrow, and so on. I mean, it's a human thing. This is how we have lived. We are saying we are going to bring this to an end, and we are going to stop this. So we are starting with a framework for consolidation, consolidating all these institutions and putting them together. Then next, we develop the institutional capability that we need to go forward. We have the human resources that we need to do this. And I think government is committed to spending resources on this. Although I must say that, it would also be naive to expect that, to achieve this coordination and to achieve this consolidation, it's only government that's supposed to invest in this. We want a very robust public-private partnership to support us in this consolidation as we go forward. Because industry asks for it. Government is now willing to provide it. It's time for the sector to step forward and put their money where, Yeah, so the question is, let's move forward together. I am so convinced, I can tell you for sure, I am so convinced it's going to happen, especially because of what I said. We have the most important ingredient. We have the political will, we have the leadership of the country going that direction. The president is so determined to have it done, and he's leading us in that direction. We are going to fall in line. It's something we'll achieve.
Now, there's something that you, Dr. Matiang'i, didn't say, but I'll be a bit unfair to Anne Waiguru and ask her that question, which is a fact of inefficiency, opaqueness, like you described it, does benefit some people. There are people who will make money, will make something out of governmental inefficiency. The rent-seeking involved in government, the people who will actually actively resist what goes on. How do you deal with that particular question?
Okay. I don't think in government I would necessarily say that doesn't fall in my docket because I'm not the one responsible for governance anymore. But from the experience that I have had as a civil servant, yes, there are people who benefit from the opaqueness in government. But how we will deal with it as a government, you have heard that we are moving towards open government. We are supporting the ministry responsible for facilitating that to happen. We are ensuring that in the MTP, the plan that the ICT MasterPlan is a priority.
That's the medium-term plan.
Yes, the medium-term plan going forward, that issues of governance are of priority. And also even the ICT MasterPlan, which provides a framework for open government, is a priority in that document. So there is, of course, expected a certain level. We anticipate at this point in time it won't be as huge as it's been before, some level of resistance. But as my colleague has said, with the support that we have from His Excellency and all the cabinet colleagues, because we are all of the same mind, I'm sure you can see that we're pulling together to be in this conference because we know that it is important to support that pillar that is in the Jubilee Manifesto and also a key enabler in the Vision 2030 to ensure that government is transparent and therefore more effective and efficient in delivering services to the people.